The Connecticut Sun may be leaving Uncasville for Boston or a bigger city, but that doesn't mean the Mohegan tribe are not one of the most important owners in WNBA history. Let's explain. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special Monday ISO here on No Cap Space WBB. Andrew Hobner, happy to be with you. Happy you are here with us to open up this week. And a beautiful one it is here in Denver, Colorado. It is not under 95 degrees yet, but we'll get there. Fall's on the way. And we have a whole heck of a lot to talk about. For starters, a kind of cool programming note for those of you that have followed us for a while and have kept up with our content. We very much appreciate those of you that have, those of you that are new. Glad you're with us. And get excited because you've got a nice treat coming your way as well. For many of you that know Ball Up Top, a women's basketball podcast, goes up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, typically on Tuesdays. But recently we've realized that we want to try and expand what we offer you guys, especially in this space on YouTube and over in the podcast world. So what you saw on Sunday afternoon, so yesterday afternoon, recording this on a Monday, is a sign of things to come. Every Sunday, we're going to have a wrap show of all of the late week and weekend games in the world of the WNBA. And then when we get to the college season, going to be kind of the same thing. And it will serve as a back-end podcast as well as a live weekend show for all of you. Ball Up Top is going to be moving to a Wednesday release. So now you get two podcasts every week from us here at No Cap Space. And best of all, and I know this is something that people have often discussed with us, podcast will not be chopped up into snippets anymore on YouTube. It is going to be the full show. You're going to get the entire hour here on YouTube every Wednesday morning when the podcast drops. So if you're excited for that or excited for more ball talk, for more opinions from Shawnee or Greer, or if you're a real sicko from myself or Tyler, you are in luck. You got plenty of more hoops talk to come. And it really doesn't happen without the support of this community, and wanted to thank everybody for that. Now, typically, those of you that are subscribed to us on Substack at nocapspacewbb.com, you know that we have a Monday column that I write called 5 Out, which is effectively 5 key takeaways from the last week in the world of women's basketball. It could be about stuff on the court. It could be larger macro societal issues. It could be business stuff. Really, it's anything that catches my fancy and I want to write about. But this week, I decided to do something different. I decided instead of a 5 Out, we would just go one full ISO. And it is really because of the Connecticut Sun and the news of a potential sale by the Mohegan tribe, the current owners of the Suns group, and a possible sale to former Boston Celtics owner Steve Pagliuca, and what it means for a potential relocation to the city of Boston. So I will open up this first. This is a Celtics Wire story before we get into the column, just for those of you that aren't aware of what the news was this past weekend. The Boston Globe opened up the reporting with a salvo on Saturday that said that a deal was just about done. $325 million, sale of the Connecticut Sun Mohegan tribe to this ownership group that's owned by Steve Pagliuca, who used to be a minority owner of the Boston Celtics. And that eventually that relocation would go to Boston. So effectively, he pays $325 million for the franchise, and then moves the franchise from Uncasville to Boston. The WNBA, for their part, came out with a pretty forceful statement saying nothing is done yet here. And reading between the lines of what exactly that situation is really, if you're the WNBA, you want as much money as you can possibly get in expansion fees, right? Boston is such a sought-after market in terms of basketball interest, in terms of market size, in terms of importance to that Acela corridor, that I-95 corridor, really the top end that would combine Washington, a future potential Philadelphia WNBA franchise, the New York Liberty, and then a team in Boston, much like it is with all the other professional sports. And a WNBA team, a pure expansion team, would probably net you about $500 million if you're tracking how much expansion fees are and what they are becoming, right? So if you're the WNBA, you would rather take Boston as an expansion team because there's a higher upshot that you're going to get more money than in this deal, which would potentially be under a half a bill, $325 million, to relocate the franchise. I think the WNBA in their calculus probably wants to relocate the Suns somewhere different. Expansion city, mind you, that is maybe in line, so to speak. Philly, Nashville, Austin, Houston, kind of take your pick. OKC's in the mix. There's plenty of cities vying for one. Denver here is, expressed interest in the past. And if you hand it over to Boston, you might open yourself up to an antitrust suit, because a lot of the discussion that I have heard from non-NBA backed investor groups, so expansion teams that I have reported on that are not backed by NBA money or in an NBA legacy market, have indicated a bit of a concern about NBA teams getting priority here. And that the understanding is basically, we are going to wait until the NBA tells us it's time to go. But if you end up with this situation where, Boston potentially gets to skip the line because the WNBA wants an expansion fee as opposed to relocation, then you get into some fuzzy stuff about the 42% of the league's ownership and where that comes in for expansion franchises and owners, etc. But that's not what I'm here talking about. What I'm here talking about is, this pitch from Steve Pagliuca. They say that they want to keep the team in New England. The Boston Globe had some reporting that, the team would be in Boston, but it could also theoretically play in Providence in the early season, so it doesn't conflict with potential Celtics or Bruins playoff games at TD Garden. Jen Rosati, the president of the Sun, says that the sale is not final. There's still a lot of time. Emily Adams of the Hartford Courant also reporting that there is a potential other bid on the table from Mark Lasry, the former owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, to try and buy and relocate the Sun to Hartford and keep the team still in Connecticut. So that's all of the background information that I want to lay out here this week. Is the Sun have been looking to sell for about a year now. A potential buyer is here. We have some fuzziness regarding relocation versus expansion. Does it go to Boston? Does it go somewhere else? Is this even the group that ends up buying the team? All of that is a important preamble to this, because what I wrote about today in 5 Out is that even though we don't know where they are heading now in terms of ownership and relocation, this is going to end at some point for the Connecticut Sun. The Mohegan tribe will cease their operations of this franchise and will eventually give it off to the next ownership group. If you are a new fan to the game and you have been here for a year or two, I would not blame you if you saw this happen and said, good, get the non-moneyed owners out of here. They are cheaping out. They are having playoff practices at a community center with a kid's birthday on the other gym floor. They are selling off players left and right in the offseason. They are effectively tanking. Their payroll is minimal. This is a team that is not befitting of ownership in the WNBA as it is currently constructed. And while you are not necessarily wrong in this era of the WNBA, that the Sun and the Mohegan ownership might not be cut out for the arms race that is now emerging, I wrote in 5 Out this week about how important it is to remember that the Mohegan tribe is one of the most successful and one of the most important ownership groups in WNBA history. And I'll kind of explain it through over the course of this story. And in order to do that, I want to start with the history of this. 2002, the NBA ceases league ownership of the W. So in the first 5 years of the WNBA, the people that owned the teams did not own the teams. They managed teams that were owned by the NBA as a league entity. And the reason that the NBA did this was to ensure stability in ownership groups and sustain success. They wanted to keep it for 5 years just to get it off the ground and then allow the owners to decide what they wanted to do with it. Well, naturally, a couple of ownership groups immediately cut bait. The DeVos family, I don't know. They are the owners of the Orlando Magic. They also owned a team called the Orlando Miracle. And at first opportunity, Rich DeVos said, we're out. And there was no local ownership group in Orlando that was willing to buy up. And so in comes the Mohegan tribe, offering $10 million to buy the team and relocate it to Connecticut. Not only did they become the first independently owned WNBA franchise in doing this move, they also became the only professional sports team in Connecticut after the Hartford Whalers left in 97 and became the Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL. This was a huge deal for a litany of reasons. Number one, this is the height of UConn. Nikesha Sales is on this Orlando Miracle team and eventually the Connecticut Sun. They make a trade to get Rebecca Lobo. And so you have these two UConn legends in Uncasville, in Connecticut, sole pro team in the state. And it is this massive, deal for the state, for the brand, and for the area. Now, here's what happens after that. Because the Orlando Miracle made the playoffs once in 4 years. They were a middling 500 team for the entirety of their tenure. So what does the Sun do? They go out and hire Mike Tebow. They get Lobo. They keep the three best players from the Miracle, Katie Douglas, Taj McWilliams, Franklin, and Pee Wee Johnson, who all ended up being multi-time All-Stars. And a year later, they make it to the WNBA Finals. In the 22 years that Connecticut has been a franchise, they have made the playoffs 16 times. They have made the conference finals, and in some cases, the league semifinals, because we don't split by conference anymore in the W. But they've been in the Final Four of the WNBA 11 times. They made the finals 4 times. Tina Charles has won an MVP here. Jonquel Jones won an MVP here. Alyssa Thomas has won a multitude of all WNBA awards here. They were best described, I guess, as a Moneyball team, but their front office was really incredible. After 2003, they traded Pee Wee Johnson, and they ended up with Lindsay Whalen. 6 years later, they flipped Lindsay Whalen in exchange for Renee Montgomery and a first overall pick. They get Tina Charles, and she wins the MVP like maybe 2 years later. They trade Tina Charles in 2014 after she requested a trade out. They get New York's 4th overall pick. That becomes Alyssa Thomas, who stays with the team for a decade. They drafted Chelsea Gray, and I don't think people really think about this that much. Connecticut drafted Chelsea Gray. She did not start in Los Angeles. So they drafted Chelsea Gray with the 11th overall pick in 2014. They end up flipping that pick. A couple years later in 2016, that becomes Jonquel Jones. They find Dejanay Carrington. They sign players like Courtney Williams. They draft players like Brianna Jones. Their front office has always been good. And importantly, it's always been a place that people come back to, because up until really the last 4 or 5 years, when the arms race of facilities truly kicked off in the WNBA, I would make an argument that Connecticut was in the top half of facilities, and you would get players that would re-sign deals. They would get people in free agency, and players would return. And they did this all while being not only the only tribal-owned team in professional sports at that time, but I also want to show this for all you business heads out there. The Mohegan were also the first group to turn a profit in the WNBA. They did this in like 2005, mind you. So while there's been this discussion this year about whether or not the league itself turns a profit and why that matters for paying players within the CBA, the team that you could argue is the weakest link now was once a standard bearer and a model for what happens when your ownership cares about you. And they invested and made a profit and were the first WNBA team to do so. Now, obviously, times have changed, right? I mean, it's one of these situations where the priorities of the Mohegan tribe are different. They are not going to spend 8 or 9 figures on a facility, one that they could afford, mind you. They could do it on the, I don't know if it's the Thames or the Thames River. It's kind of funny to have like Connecticut on the River Thames, but even the Long Island Sound. You could put a facility, $100 million facility in New London, right on the banks of the Long Island Sound, and make it look like Northwestern's new football facility. They can afford that. The tribe absolutely can afford that. But what the tribe's requirements are and what their priorities are is about the community and their tribal membership, which is over about 2,000 people right now. And the reason that feet have dragged on some of this stuff is that you have a cause greater than yourself here if you are the Mohegan tribe. You have to do things for the betterment of the whole. And does a facility solely for your WNBA franchise accomplish that? And that is something I don't know if they do. And if that is the case, then the Sun deciding to potentially sell to Steve Pagliuca or Mark Lazary or any other group tells me that they are who they've always been. And that is a good steward of their franchise and a responsible owner of the league. They have put in the money and the requirements necessary for this team to succeed, to compete, to be at the highest levels of this game. And even though they've never won one, they are so important to the fabric of the WNBA. And I wrote this here because I know I'm a big analogy guy. The Sun are the WNBA's Buffalo Bills. They might not have titles, but they've come really close. They're not a sexy city. The people that go there love it and come back, like Tina Charles, who returned this year. And there are so many different people that have said, yes, the facilities are lacking, but the organization is generally positive. And the state itself, from UConn to the Sun to the non-WNBA franchises like the New England Blizzard that showed out really well attendance-wise, they have always been one of the beating hearts of this sport. And the one thing I want to say as I roll out here is when we talk about franchises and being a good owner, being a good part of the game, it's knowing when to cash out too. If you look at the Oakland A's right now in Major League Baseball, John Fisher is a hated owner for a variety of reasons, but one is the intentional cheap out. Intentionally cheaping out to get out of Oakland, to play in a rickety AAA stadium in Sacramento, and to try and fleece Las Vegas into giving him the team. Proper stewardship would have been selling that team to somebody that would have cared and would have kept it. The Sun can't afford the arms race that is happening for one reason or another. Either a financial barrier or just the community priorities of the tribe are different than that of independent billionaire owners. But good stewardship is saying, we don't want to die on the vine. We don't want our team to die on the vine. We don't want this legacy to be tarnished. And so we will sell. And we will find a buyer that will take care of this team. And whether it's in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or Hartford or any other place in the country, one thing I've seen a lot of in the last 6 months has been a lot of talk about the tribe being subpar owners in the WNBA broadly. And while you are correct in saying the last year has laid bare the challenges, insurmountable, it seems, that the Mohegan face in trying to compete in this league, they have always been one of the most indispensable, important, caring, diligent, and smart ownership groups and front offices this league has ever seen. And however the sale of this team goes, wherever they go to, I wrote this column today because I want everyone, new fan or old, this is on us as longtime women's basketball media, WNBA media. It's on us to educate those of you just coming in. You shouldn't have to search. We will give it to you because it is important to be proactive in giving people their flowers while they are here. And the Mohegan tribe, for all of the shortcomings of the last 12 months of play, deserve their flowers when the time comes and the ink is dry on the final sale agreement. They have been vital to the survival of this league, and they deserve to be talked about, to be honored, celebrated, and given a standing ovation when they go as one of the great stewards of women's basketball in this country. Regardless of where it is now, that's where they need to be. So we'll be doing this on Mondays. 5 Outs will be hitting your feeds on Mondays. Ball Up Top going to be hitting you on Wednesdays, and post game is going to be live on Sundays with a lot of other videos in the in-between. So like, share, subscribe, help us on the road to 5,000 subscribers. We are almost there, and we got some great stuff coming for you as well. Find all our work on nocapspacewbb.com. Consider subscribing to the Ball Knowers tier on Substack, and follow us on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you have it, we shall be. That's all the time we got on the ISO today, and we will see you right back here next week.